Good morning, everyone. This is Jennifer from the Public Library of Mount Vernon in Knox County, and I'm taking you along this morning as we get into our beehives. My husband is the beekeeper here. I'm just doing the filming. So I thought it would be interesting to share this with you. My husband has been keeping bees for a number of years, and he'll tell you everything that's going to be happening as he looks into our beehives. Let's see if we can get a good picture of what the girls are doing this morning. And he'll be sharing with you what he's doing. I think he's going to be putting on some more boxes and just looking in the hives themselves to see how the girls are doing. This is my husband, Robert, and he is going to be sharing with you what he'll be doing to the beehives today.
Okay, today I wanted to get into basically all of the hives. There's 4 of them, and just to explain a little bit about them, the one all the way over on the left that you see all the bees crawling all over, that was a new hive this spring that I purchased, and the one next to it that you don't see any bees coming out of is one that actually lived through last winter, and you don't see any bees coming out of the front because they have chosen to go in and out in the back through a very large hole in the box, which is due mostly to my negligence on repairing things. But that's okay because they are very healthy. They're going in and out just fine, so I don't really care where they go in and out. The third one is another new one that I purchased this spring. They're not nearly as strong as the one all the way over on the left. Not really sure why, but they're doing okay. You can see them flying in and out. Matter of fact, if you look carefully, you can see little yellow or orange pads on the side of the bees, and that's them bringing pollen in. They fill little baskets on their legs with pollen as they go from flower to flower. And pollen can be all different colors. Right now, because of what's blooming, it looks like it's mostly yellow and orange. You know, you might see stuff from sunflowers or lilies or all kinds of different things. But anyway, that's what that is. And then the 4th hive, all the way over kind of by itself, is a hive that I split from that new hive that had bees all over it. That new hive was so strong that I went ahead and split that hive out into another one. And while it is a bit smaller, it has less boxes on it because it has less population, because we made a split out of it, it is also doing very well. You can see obviously lots of bees going in and out, foraging, getting nectar, pollen, propolis, all the stuff they need to raise babies and pack honey away. So we're going to get into these hives and just see how they're doing. I expect out of at least those first 2, what we call the overwintered hive, which was the second one, and the new hive that did so well, to see enough surplus honey to maybe take off. But that's what we're here to find out. And also, if they need more room, I also suspect that that hive that has all kinds of bees on the front of it is a little bit crowded, and that's why they're out like that. It's normal for bees to do that a little bit in the hot weather, but I noticed that these bees were doing this. It's actually, the term is called bearding, because it kind of makes the hive look like it's got a beard. They were doing that in very cool weather the past couple nights, and that indicates to me that they don't have enough room. So we're going to look at that and see if we have any honey, and just kind of look at the overall health of all 4 hives and just see how they're doing. So we'll go ahead and get started. I think I'm going to tackle the one that I bought new that looks very, very strong first, and just get in there and have a look at them and maybe show you a little bit about what goes on inside a hive. 2 main tools I use for this. This is a device called a hive tool. It's just a little pry bar. You can get into and pick the frames out, dislodge things. The bees are very good at sealing everything up with a material they collect called propolis, and it's really sticky and gummy, and it works really well to seal things and keep the cold air out, and it's really hard to dislodge. So that's what the hive tool's for, picking things through and scraping things off. And then the other thing I use is sugar water to kind of calm the bees down. A lot of beekeepers use smoke, and that works very well also. But I just decided a long time ago that I really don't like the complication of working with a smoker and keeping it lit and keeping it running. And I find that sugar water does really well as far as just kind of having a calming effect on the bees if you squirt a little bit on them. So I keep that handy too. So we'll go ahead and take this hive apart. I always have a block on them. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull this hive apart, and my wife asked me to just mention to you guys how long I've been keeping bees and so forth, a little bit about my bee journey. I have been keeping bees on and off for about 15 years, not totally consistently, but pretty consistently. I did some with my daughter when she was younger, and that was back when she was 11 or 12, and she's going to be 27, so it's been a while. And I also, as a kid on the farm, we kept bees, and I didn't know anything about them, but I always was very interested in them. I thought they were really fascinating creatures. So I've been around bees a good bit of my life. That is not to say that I know a whole lot about them. There is so much to learn, but I do enjoy what I have learned. Now, as you can see, even this outer cover, which is what this is called a telescoping outer cover, is stuck down pretty good with the propolis, which is kind of unusual. I really don't like to tap on things too much because it bothers the bees, but sometimes you have to. The inside of this telescoping cover, they're covered with bees, and this is called the inner cover, and it's, believe it or not, has a little hole in here to get down into the hive, and they're covered with bees. So I'm thinking this hive is pretty packed. We need to put another box on it just to give them some room, and I should have done this a while ago, but I didn't have any more boxes till recently when I ordered some more. So you start popping them open, and as I said, the idea is to not jerk things around any more than you need to, because they don't care for their house to be destroyed any more than you would. Pop them open, and that's the bottom of the inner cover, all kind of bees. And what we're going to look at is these devices in here called frames, and this is where the bees live. This is what the bees draw out wax comb cells, and in those cells they put honey, they put pollen, they put their babies that we call larvae or brood. Everything that happens in the hive happens in these cells, and the cells are drawn out on frames. Now, most beehives, and this is probably not always true, I know very little about bees in the grand spectrum of things, but most beehives, down here in the bottom is what we call where the brood chambers are, and that is primarily where the queen lays her eggs and where the babies or brood are raised so that they can become adults and go out and forage and take care of the hive. That's how the whole thing works. And the further up you go, they start to pack honey away. And honey, and people sometimes wonder, why do bees make honey? Well, it's their food source. That's what they eat. But they usually, healthy hives make so much of it, that's why beekeepers can come along and take some for ourselves. And the bees are left more than enough honey to make it through the winter. That's what they do. They pack it away in the summer so they have food to eat, not only in the summer, but in the wintertime. So this is likely going to be all honey. This is what we call a honey super. Now, some beekeepers have deeper or thicker boxes for the brood and then shallower boxes for the honey supers. And the reason they do that is honey is a lot heavier for its size than brood is. So if you took what they would call, I think, a 9.5 or 10-inch deep box and had the bees fill it with honey, it would weigh over 90 pounds. A lot of people would have trouble hauling those around. I use mediums, which are about 7 inches thick, for everything. And I do that just because if I want to move stuff around, if I want to put honey down in the brood chamber or brood up in a honey super to get them to move around, I don't have to worry about different heights of frames. They're all the same. So let's go ahead and get into this hive. And what you need to do, as I said, it's all propolised in, so you kind of start to pry out one of the center ones a little bit. And we do that on both sides. And you can see those bees, they know I'm around, and they kind of come after me, which is why I wear a bee suit. I've seen some beekeepers online that don't use a suit. They're out here, they don't have anything on protective other than a bandana over their face. I guess that's fine if you want to do that. I don't like getting stung, so I wear a bee suit. Okay, and I've pulled this frame out. This is in the top super of this hive. And if we get a close-up in here and look down in where that frame was, you can see that, man, there's a lot of bees in this hive. They are crowded. They absolutely need another box, which I will provide for them before we're all done. But what we have here in this top super, this is honey. And this is what we call capped honey. The way bees make honey is they will collect nectar from flowers and they will put it in these cells. You can see underneath the covering the little hexagon-shaped cells. Once they put that uncapped honey into the cells, then they will fan it with their wings to dry it out. And they do that to concentrate the honey. You've probably heard about people making maple syrup and how they have to gather sap and then they have to boil it off to concentrate the sap down into syrup. Well, bees kind of do the same thing. I want to say they dehydrate it down to about 18% or something like that. And when it's ready, they will secrete wax out of glands in their bodies and use it to cover up the honey. And then when they need to use this honey, they will uncap it and feed it out to themselves, to the babies, whatever. So this is a really nice frame of almost completely capped honey. There's a couple of little cells at the very top. For some reason they didn't cap, and maybe a couple at the bottom, but in general this is a really nice frame of capped honey. That's what that looks like. And I'm going to set it just down here, and I usually just kind of set it down carefully and lean it up against something so if we can help it, no bees get killed. Bees getting killed is almost a foregone conclusion when you get into a hive, but we try to do as little as possible. You can even see here I'm trying to move them out of the way so I don't skewer one with this hive tool if I can help it. But I want to pull a couple more out just to kind of show you how they come apart, which is not very easy at times. I'll usually loosen both ends and then kind of grab it in the middle and it pops out. And that's another, as you can see, just a beautiful frame of capped honey. That's fantastic. If I see a lot of that, I'm going to take some of it for myself. You can see the bees all over it. Those are primarily what we call workers. And I can kind of tell from their size and their color that a lot of them are young bees. You see right in the middle, they're smaller, they're real bright colored. Those are new bees that have been, come out of their larval stage fairly recently. There's some down here that maybe look a little bit darker and are a little older, okay? But that's good to see because that means we got a healthy hive. We've got a queen laying eggs, we've got brood getting fed, turning into adults, and these are what we call hive bees. Now that doesn't mean they're a different species of bees. It simply means that they're at a different stage in their life than the bees that are out foraging. Every worker bee, which is a female bee, by the way, starts as an egg, obviously, 3 days as an egg, as a larva that is open, that's getting fed for about 6 more days. So in 9 days, they spin a little cocoon over themselves and they cap the brood off. Then they stay in that state for another 15 days. 21 days they emerge as an adult, and they come out into the hive as what they call a nurse bee or a hive bee. Their job is to take care of the brood, feed the brood, clean the hive, generate wax so that they can make more cells to put things in. Eventually they will graduate to what they call guard bees, where they are staying just at the entrance of the hive up here and making sure nothing gets in that's not supposed to. Bees from other hives, wasps, murder hornets if they ever get over this way. They protect the hive. Eventually, after doing that for about 20 days or so, they become field bees and they begin to forage. They go out and they literally work themselves to death during the harvest season, gathering nectar, propolis, water, pollen, all the things that beehives need to survive. So that's the life cycle of a female worker bee. And I think it's really interesting. They spend about 21, 22 days as an egg/larva. They spend about that same amount of time as a hive bee, and they spend about that same amount of time as a field bee. Okay, so this whole box, or super, as beekeepers like to call it, looks to me like it is chock full of honey, capped honey. And I make that distinction because we might run into some honey frames in this hive that are not all capped yet, and you'll see that they don't have that wax coating. you'll see inside the cells there's just what looks like a nice clear liquid, but there's no cap on it. And what that means is the bees aren't done drying it out yet and it's not ready for harvest. But this looks like almost all capped honey. It's fantastic. I am very excited about this. So because it looks like it's all honey, I don't think I need to dig any more frames out and look at anything else. I think we can consider this a complete honey super. So I'm going to put the 2 frames back in. And when I put them in, I think it's important to put them back in the same order in which they came out, because the bees put them that way for a reason. And when I put them back, I try, with the last one at least, to shake some of these bees off so there's less chance of bees getting hurt or killed. As I said, killing bees when you're in the hive is pretty much unavoidable, but I do try to minimize it. So because I know this whole box is surplus honey, we don't need to mess around with it anymore, but I do want to take the whole box off and look down in the brood chamber and see how things are going down there. And to do that, I've got to kind of pop the corners up all the way around, loosen that propolis seal. As you can see, the bees are a little bit irritated about it. They're not doing too bad. I'll spray a little sugar water on them. They tend to settle down a little. They like the sugar, and just the moisture tends to slow them down. Not exactly sure all the reasons why it works, but I believe it works pretty well. Let me get this super off. This sucker's heavy. It is heavy. That is full of honey. You can actually see where the bottom of the frames, where the wax is, and it got popped open. That is some really nice honey right there. What cracks me up is when I open up these hives, these bees act like this is a new food source. You can see them getting all over it and eating it and sucking it up, even though they gathered it all themselves. Kind of funny. So I want to look down here in this next box and just see what we have. Before too long, we should get into the brood area of the hive. And brood simply refers to the babies in their larval state in a beehive. So when we refer to a brood chamber, it's simply the area that the babies are being raised, as opposed to where honey's being stored. Now we may find some honey in here, but we're probably also going to see some brood. And these girls have really been busy. I say girls because the worker bees, as I said, are female. Now this is some weird comb that they built. I'm not even sure what to think of this, but you run into it now and then. Some beekeepers will pull this apart and make them redo it. I'm usually not too concerned about it. You can see that a lot of that is capped honey still. Some of it got tore open when I moved it out. If you look over on the left side here, you're going to find some uncapped honey that we talked about. If you look down in those cells, you'll see the clear liquid of the honey, but it's not covered over yet, which means the bees haven't finished curing it yet.
Now also tell them too that they make, don't they draw these combs out?
That is correct.
Individual
That's correct.
comb cells.
These frames are plastic and they have the hexagonal shape stamped on them, but the actual wax cells are made by the bees. They secrete wax out of glands, I believe, in their abdomens, and they produce that wax and fashion it into perfect six-sided circles, which is just fantastic and amazing to me. How they do all that. They do that in the dark, by the way. A lot of people don't think about that. They do this in a completely covered up state of darkness. So how they do it, I don't know. Fascinating. But anyway, that's kind of a weird frame, and you're going to run into that into a beehive. I don't get too concerned about it if the hive's healthy. And look at all these bees. My gosh, I have been remiss in my duties. I should have given them another box quite a while ago. But we'll take care of that today. Let me pull another frame and see what we got going on in here. That's a little more normal looking frame. And here's where you're going to see, if you look into, let me just set this down. I'll point out with a hive tool. If you look very carefully in here, you're going to see open or uncapped brood. You're going to see a little grub down in there if you're looking really carefully. You may not be able to see it, or you may. But there's little tiny larvae in there. And you probably won't be able to see it here either. But down in those cells, I'm seeing just the tiniest little dot. Looks like a miniature grain of rice. And that is an egg. That's an egg that's laid by the queen. Okay, so we're definitely into the brood chamber here. And if you look carefully, you can almost see a pattern. There's brood here, and as you move further out, you start to see this little line of honey. You can see that? The bees make their hive in almost a circular pattern. And that's what we call a brood pattern or a hive pattern. They start with a brood, then they work out to pollen, then they work out to honey. Fascinating how they do that.